the Center for Civic Engagement and the Richmond Quest. And what we looked at was the inclusion, assimilation, exclusion of Muslims in the United States and Islam as a religion in the United States. So I broke down the paper that I wrote into these broad concepts that I came across, but I'm going to focus on maybe 2 or 3 of those today, just because it's a lot to cover. So let me talk about the method a little bit. I focused on interviews, so these are not surveys. It's actually interviewing about 30 community leaders and other people in the community. These are all, most of them were Muslims. Some of them were just people who knew Muslims. And I focused the paper around exploring linkages between traditionally Islamic values and American values. There seems to be, ever since 9/11, when we saw that the American Muslim community got hit on 2 fronts. One, they were attacked on their national identity as Americans, but on a second front, they were also attacked because they were looked upon as sort of responsible or similar to those who were responsible for the attack. So I focused this paper trying to maybe settle some of the differences between Muslims living in the United States and the broader American culture. So origins, this is really important because a lot of people don't realize that Islam is Islam understands itself within the Abrahamic faith tradition. So it understands itself as rooted in the teachings of Abraham, which it sees as the leader of mankind. And so to Muslims, the Quran is just a reminder of truths that have already been revealed. So Muslims believe that the Torah and the Bible are authentic texts from God, and that the only reason the Quran is any different is that it is revealed to a particular community. And it derives in importance because in the Quran God says, this is going to be the last reminder. So the Quran frames itself as the last reminder of the message that has been revealed continuously. And so Christians, Muslims, Jews, and have a sacred historical narrative. And this sacred historical narrative that's shaped the U.S. American thinking in terms of government and culture, it's pretty similar. So we can learn a lot from each other, and also it's easier to get caught up in nuances, and a lot of the discussion about Islam that goes on tends to be focused on particularities, and it doesn't focus on the larger similarities that are out there. So in terms of humankind, diversity in the United States is probably the most diverse place on earth right now. New York City, one of the most diverse cities. I think I was reading somewhere that the only place that has a larger kind of cross-section of Muslims than New York City is Mecca during the Hajj. So you can see how important New York City is to the Muslim community there. And so the belief is that God has purposely created variation in the human family as a challenge, and not as enough to divide up humans. And so this is where Islam gets its idea of religious pluralism from. It says us that the fact that a number of religions exist in the world is part of a master plan, and that Islam affirms the inherent value of other faith traditions, like Judaism, for example, Christianity, and so the larger Abrahamic line of religion that Islam asserts their value. Looking at 3 more principles that I thought were important. One is Islam is very meritocratic, and this is something we're used to as Americans. I mean, our society is not like, it's not based on nobility. It's very much based on what you do, and you can come from, we have a lot of, part of the American story is kind of the rags to riches, coming from the bottom. And this is, for Islam, everybody is responsible for their own deeds, as good deeds or bad deeds, and then you will be judged. The people of all religious communities will be judged based on those. And for Muslims just believe that Islam is a path to that, and that they don't deny that someone, for example, Abraham is described as a Muslim in the Quran, and I mean we all know that he wasn't culturally Muslim, but the idea is, that you'll see later on, that Muslims understand monotheism as kind of a larger idea, that if you are monotheistic, if you believe in God, then it doesn't really matter what particular religion you believe in, as long as you believe that. racial equality, we have two instances. One is the last sermon of the Prophet, in which he basically says that racial differences shouldn't matter, that you are part of a single community, and he tells people to convey this message. And this interesting part of that, Muhammad himself, the call to prayer that is sounded 5 times a day in cities around the world today was, he chose a freed slave to first say that, so a freed African slave, Bilal. And this call that Bilal first made now, it goes out 5 times a day in Cairo and all the way to Indonesia. So you can see the Muslims every day are reminded that the call to prayer was sounded by a freed African slave. Rights and justice, there's the idea of karma, which is dignity. We have a I think the University of Richmond, we actually have an institute called karma. And basically this is the idea of human dignity as an inherent value. Thomas Jefferson talked about this when he talks about natural law and human rights. So it's something that's very fundamental to the American tradition, but also central to Islam. So the popular media narrative that we see go on is just, I think it's counterproductive. And this is what came across in interviews, that a lot of these, especially the leaders, they understood the other side very well, and a lot of the general public didn't understand where the other side. For example, if you have non-Muslim Americans who have questions about Islam, and sometimes when they ask those questions, it can be interpreted as sort of offensive to some Muslims because they're not working with a historical background. So the media narrative that rose after 9/11 that is basically views Islam as kind of the other. There was us versus that dynamic, and what I try to do in my paper was show that the us versus them idea is really it's a false concept. You shouldn't think about it in that framework because it's very limiting. You can only think about it in us versus them. You will end up focusing on particularities, and you ignore the larger idea that Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Christianity, Judaism, the Judeo-Christian kind of idea that's regarded as the foundation of American governance, culture, that is not itself very different from Islamic teachings. And the challenge that's facing us because of that is not that, I hear a lot about that we have to build bridges and we have to do that. And I think it's true yes, we do have to build bridges, but there are already a lot of bridges that are built for us, such as the Abrahamic faith tradition that we just need to cross. And the problem that's now, looking at like 9 months after the research that we saw Barack Obama elected, and there was a lot of news that he was going to be a Muslim, and people were scared, and it was going on while I was doing this, and it's interesting to see that 9 months later that's kind of all died out, and nobody talks about that anymore.